Hello and welcome to the YouTube channel of mprugs.com. My name is Mike. I'm the moderator in the series of videos that is all about Persian rugs and carpets from around the world. And in this video, I want to briefly talk to you about the differences between old and new rugs. And I've done this with some of my other videos where I talked about how the weaving techniques and also generally how carpets have changed over the decades, and this is specifically about handmade Persian rugs. In this case, we have a couple of Tabriz rugs. The Tabriz Persian rugs are some of the best known handmade Persian rugs that you'll find over the internet or in the stores. They are kind of, the high-end Tabriz rugs are kind of like the Mercedes of Persian rugs. If you are into Persian rugs, you know what a Tabriz is. Well, here we have a couple of examples of what is considered to be standard quality, and these are the 40 rudge pieces. We have one that is about 40, 50 years old. We have another one that is less than 5 years old. And what I thought about doing is show you some of the differences, because over the decades there have been changes in the wool, the weaving, not so much. Both of them are made using what is known as a Turkish nuts. So the actual technique, the actual weave is the same. But over time, as more dyes became available, as the type of wool has also evolved, you will find that there are some people who love the older pieces, and then there are others who love the newer pieces. In case you're wondering, being that I'm surrounded by rugs all day, my heart is actually with the newer pieces rather so much than the older ones. The older ones are beautiful. They are in a group of their own. But to me, the 40 rudge Tabriz rugs, kind of like cars. If I want to buy a car that I want to take my family on a trip, I want to get a new one. But if I want a car that I'm going to be enjoying, and it's almost like something that I want to have for myself on the weekends or something that I want to tinker with, well, then I'm going to go with an older car. And the same thing here. The folks who are looking at buying an older Tabriz rug, typically they are not in the market for a new one, because there are differences. And so rather than always hearing what people have to say, you know, there are a lot of people who badmouth the old pieces. There are some who don't like the new ones. I'm going to show you literally, I got two of them side by side, and I specifically chose this light colored piece because it's the same quality. Both of these are 40 rudge Tabriz rugs. They're also both the same size, 2 meter by 3 meter, or roughly, for those of you in the United States, about 6.5 to 7 feet wide and about 10 feet long. So they're about the same size, same wool. There is no silk in either one of these two. Well, actually, there is silk in the newer pieces that the old one doesn't have, but there's such small amounts of it. I'm going to point it out to you that as far as I'm concerned, I sell these as wool rugs. But being that I especially do not typically feature a whole lot of 40 rudge Tabriz rugs, being that we specialize in the family in the 50 rudge pieces, I thought you may appreciate it. So I've made the comparisons on silk rugs and some of the other rugs. Well, in this one, I'm going to talk to you about the differences in one of the most common types of good quality Persian rugs, and that is the Tabriz rugs. So as always, I'm going to get behind the camera And so I'm going to continue here in just a second. All right, so here I'm back again as always. Just first of all, I'm just going to walk around these rugs. To the right, we have an older 40 Rudge Tabriz rug. Really excellent condition. This is a piece that was not, obviously it was not worn out or anything. This is not something that was previously owned. Then to my left, I'm sorry, that was to my right. To my left, obviously, this is a very classic Tabriz rug. Nothing unusual about it. This is one of the most common types of handmade rugs. I specifically chose the beige piece. I wanted to show you the difference in contrast, but also just point out the fact that these are all both the same. These are considered to be 40 Rudge pieces. You have the medallion designs and everything. Now, one of the features that I like about, well, let's talk about the new rugs. What I like about the new rugs, they are straighter. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. I can tell you, as I always point out, being born and raised in Germany before I moved out to the States, I love the newer rugs because they are much more, well, they're woven in a straight line. That's the best way for me to put it. And oftentimes, even in the lower grade, the standard quality 40 Rudge pieces, you will have, in this case, tiny amounts of silk. And I'm going to hold the camera at an angle here. You can actually see it where I put my fingertip. You'll see in the flower design, in the borders, you will see that white shininess. That is silk. That is typical for newer pieces. In the older pieces, you don't have that. Typically, older Tabriz, and I'm going back over here now, you will see that there is no silk. And as I go around the edges, you will also see, well, it's nice, but it's not as perfectly straight as I would like them to be. But they're good. I mean, they're not crooked by any means. But if you were to ask me about straightness, if straightness matters, you're going to go with a newer piece rather than an older piece. Also, you will notice the density of the pile. Older is finer. Newer is thicker. The wool that they use today is much of a thicker wool than the wool that was used in the old days. And also, what they do is, after the rugs are woven, they basically trim them. I mean, the rug pile can be 4 to 5 centimeters thick. It is carved with machines where they go in and they basically cut off the wool. Well, on the newer pieces, you have a much thicker pile than you have on the older ones. The older ones tend to have, they tend to have a thickness as this 50 Rudge. So when clients ask me, I always tell them, I said the difference between the two, and I'm just going to hold them right here. You can see it. The old 40 Rudge is actually almost half as thick as the newer ones. So actually, the older pieces feel more luxurious, more finer. And they also tend to have a slightly higher knot count. This knot count on the 40 Rudge on the old school is more in line with the 50 Rudge today. And this is where a lot of the old school Persian rug collectors, they talk about it. This is new. This is the old 40 is almost like the new 50. Whereas the new 40 is of a much thicker knot, and the thickness of the knots translate into lower knot count. So old 40s are finer than the new 40s. What the new 40s do have is, like I said, the silk, a little bit of silk highlights. Sometimes you have the, like I said, the straightness. That, I'm going to be honest with you, it is perfectly normal on the old pieces to have one length that is an inch or two longer than the other side, you know, when you have a large rug like this. But when you talk about, some people talk about the dyes and everything else that goes along with the production. The old days, 40, basically, it really meant more like a 45 rudge. Means a rudge, for those of you who don't know, is basically 7 centimeters. I think it's 6.8 to be exact. It's an old measuring tool. And it's how many knots you have over the 6.8 centimeters. Well, in the old days, this would be like 43, 44 knots. And they would call it a 40 rudge. Today, you're going to have about 38 or 39 knots. And they're going to call it a 40 rudge. Well, you will notice a difference when you compare the two. Now, as far as durability, this is an older piece. This is a newer piece. And being that in the old days, the dyes tend to be pure vegetable, whereas now it's become a mixture of vegetable and commercial, you will notice that the patina is starting to set in. I'm just going to point this out. For example, right here, if you notice, this area right here, just a little bit lighter than over here, just a little bit lighter than over here. And this is what you want. These are handmade Persian rugs. People buy them because of the older pieces, because they have some of the unique features that you don't find, like the aging. Also, what you also typically do not find is signatures. And this is just, it's not, I always tell my clients, it's not, you're not getting added value. But, for example, this is on the older Tabriz right here, we have the little signature that is woven in, and it says Shishkelani. The Shishkelani, that is the name. We always say it's the name of the weaver, but it's actually the person who has contracted the weaver. In the old days, this is a good chance that this was actually designed and made by the weaver. And typically this would be done in the basement of a home. These type of Tabriz rugs would be done by families, husband, wife, or just a wife. And so this is something that is very much a home business, and then they would sell them to the stores. Whereas in the newer pieces, as you can see here, it's not a commercial product, but this is something where someone owns a design and they basically gave copies of the design to multiple weavers and say, here, make us this rug, and when you're done with it, let us know. Now, as far as value, this is something that people oftentimes talk about. A good quality older piece, even if it has flaws and everything, is worth a lot more than a newer piece. You're looking at a $2,000 rug. I would imagine this light colored piece would sell anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000. Whereas this one will start at about $3,000, and depending on where you look at it, depending on who's selling it, you can pay anywhere up to $5,000 or $6,000. And then, of course, unfortunately, you have some people who will make a big deal about the signature, which in my opinion is complete nonsense. This is obvious. To me, it's obvious that this weaver did an excellent job, but is nowhere near as famous as some of the other weavers. So, and that's why I don't, to me, I always tell people, I said, you don't pay for the signature, you're paying for the rug itself. So there you have comparison, old versus new. In summary, if you are someone who wants a car that goes cross-country and you are going to be basically driving it for the next 10 years as an everyday car, I'm going to say new. If you want a car that is basically a fun car for a weekend, this is just something that you love to cherish and that is special to you, then you may want to consider going with an older piece. The good thing about these, either one, is that you're not spending a fortune. You're getting a good quality rug. In either case, this is something that you will simply enjoy for years and years to come. So I hope you enjoyed this video of the comparison between the old and the new Tabriz 40 rug pieces. As always, feel free to let us know if you have any questions in the comment section or visit us at mprugs.com. Feel free to subscribe, and we'll be coming back to you with many more videos to come. Take care. Bye-bye.